we have for decades in my business, if you will, engaged in discussions about how we measure and advance sustainability in corporations. It has been broadly a centrist movement. It's been a movement, or I shouldn't say a movement, a professional focus that has been center left in orientation, but really very encompassing of the right and the left traditionally. And that's why corporate sustainability has been, frankly, a target for the hard left and the hard right. Corporate sustainability for a long time has been condemned by the what the right likes to call the woke community, because they think it's not tough enough. It's not standards. It's greenwashing. It's marginalization. It's not getting to the root of the problems. So they're the biggest critics. They have been traditionally the biggest critics of corporate sustainability. Now, on the right, the political and media machine has captured corporate sustainability in these three aspects and condemned and politicized it and polarized it, so that corporate sustainability, as expressed in ESG, which is the latest set of initials to basically stand for how do companies assess their environmental, social, governance, and other impacts that are barely outside the marketplace, and how do they account for those inside the company. That is now the target practice for the political right. And I say the political right because I don't think most conservatives feel that that's a bad thing. That's just simply responsibility. But the political right, the strategists, have focused on ESG as a method of investment that they say turns companies away from profitable investments by taking off the table whole categories of industries that can be profitable: oil and gas and tobacco and weapons and so on. And so they say this is bad for America, it's bad for prosperity, it's just wokeism integrated. Now the woke community would say, no, it's not. It's not anywhere near what we want. But that's been condemned. Diversity, equity, inclusion has been targeted as favoritism for a particular group of people to the exclusion of other people. And again, this is not something that is intrinsically opposed to conservatives. In fact, conservatives, historically, the more thoughtful and intellectual side of that community, understands that diversity is intrinsically a strengthening method for a company and a system. That's why conservatives like free markets. They like choice. They like diversity. But the political class has cast diversity, equity, and inclusion as not a focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, but favoritism toward a few. And so they have condemned that. And then we have environmental justice, which is the most difficult, probably, of the three to manage. An area that a lot of funders have been favoring, but who have now backed away from it in some ways because of the sense that that is now politically impossible to carry through on. Again, there should be no division. There should be no intrinsic reason that anyone on the political right should be opposed to the environment or justice or both. But it is cast in that light. So that's the situation that we face right now, and we're going to explore this and see just where the profession and the movement that underlies these three can go now. We have three choices. The three choices are: number one, we can back off and not care about these issues as much. Pull back because it's a corporate risk to edge in to these areas. Number two, We can say we are still all in. We have not changed a bit. We are absolutely determined, and we're going to fight, fight, fight through the opposition. Or we can say, here is an opportunity to engage on these issues in substantive ways that harness the advantages that advancing the environment, justice, diversity, equity, inclusion, and sustainability all can offer. And maybe that is the most wise choice to take. Maybe we can use this to refine our own ways to improve this. So that's what we're going to discuss. Doozy, do we have a few slides, or are we going straight to Brittney?
We have some slides if you'd like to go through them.
Well, there you go. So, okay. Let's see. I'm not seeing the slides here. Do you have the slides up? Am I the only one not seeing them?
No, 1 second, they're coming.
Okay, great. So this is the C-suite and the board have a big problem. This political polarization that is a material enterprise risk. We've seen the companies that have been decimated by this. And let's go to the next slide. My computer's about to run out of juice now. I'm going to run downstairs and plug it back in as soon as I get done with this here. There's two instinctive losing moves: doubling down on yesterday's approach to ESG and DEI by morally signaling that we are still in and we're more on this than ever, and we are going to fight to the end, or retreating from yesterday's promises and making abrupt reversals. Let's see how some companies have handled this. Target has been unfortunate in the way that it's been perceived to have responded. I'm sure that internally they have a different view of how they have responded, but the perception is that they made a very clumsy retreat from sustainability and diversity commitments after making them core to their marketing, and then suddenly being attacked, suffering some real setbacks in the marketplace and in reputation, and then reversing some of their policies, which lost them trust on both sides. So they have not been a happy validator of this. Who's next? Then we've got Budweiser. Budweiser misread their brand identity. They moved aggressively into diversity as a marketing approach. Certainly makes a lot of sense, but in the process, they offended some of their brand loyalists and made themselves vulnerable to a political attack that was quite effective and measurably impacted their sales. So their lesson was an unhappy one. Disney did pretty well in the face of a direct political attack in the state of Florida. Brittney may have some perspectives on this. They chose the confrontation knowingly. They absorbed the short-term cost of it and preserved their long-term coherence. They kind of won. They kind of beat. Now, it still cost them. There's still some battles on the right about Disney, but they certainly did better than Budweiser or Target. And then finally, we've got Costco. And Costco has developed a reputation for really doing this well, being quietly consistent in their dedication to sustainability, diversity, equity, inclusion, not making a big deal about it, not plastering, their stores with marketing materials, demonstrating their virtue, but simply being there on this. And that seems to have protected them from some of the blowback here. So those are four examples of companies that have taken different approaches. Now they're in different parts of the marketplace. Not all parts of the marketplace are created equal. So not everybody is able to do it exactly the same way, but they're certainly instructive. Let's move to Brittney now, if we may. And Doozy, if I can ask you to ask Brittney the question so that I can get charged up here and not fall off the screen.
Brittney Barnett, welcome. Sorry, I'm finding you and making us view a spotlight. Hi.
Hi, everyone.
Welcome.
Now, first, of course, a little introduction. And I'm sorry, I hand it to Doozy and then I take it right back. Isn't that like the violation of the very principles we're talking about here.
Hmm. Yes.
Brittany, could you share a little bit about your background that you bring to this conversation and where you're coming from? Because you're new to
Yeah.
the leadership circle. This is your first time joining
Yeah.
it.
That's exactly as I was telling Bill earlier in our breakout session. So really happy to be here, and I'm really excited I actually discovered this group as well. So, and thank you for the opportunity for letting me speak today. Obviously a very timely topic and one that forefront for me. But just to give you a little bit of background, so academically speaking, and kind of at the onset of my career, I was rooted in urban planning and sustainable development, and then around 2018 or so, I pivoted to the private sector and focusing more on sustainability. I'm not going to take you through my whole entire trajectory, but obviously, most recently, I'm here at PwC, and I originally came into the group working with our U.S. sustainability team, focused on sustainability reporting and assurance. So a lot of the more mandatory sustainability reporting around once upon a time SEC climate rule, which, RIP there. And then most recently, we've been focused on European legislation. So getting clients ready for CSRD and a lot of those other EU requirements. But I think where I'm at now is I'm actually what we kind of call a tour. So I'm completing 2 years at our Global Acceleration Center, which is sustainability focused. And what we're doing is basically I guess, changing our sustainability strategy or trajectory in how we think about sustainability and how we advise clients on it. So we kind of work across all of our different territories and 330,000 employees to make sure we kind of have this unified point of view and perspective when we do go and advise clients on topics. And more specifically, which I can kind of get into, is I'm working in the upskilling and education part. So it's a bit of a daunting task, but that's where I'm at now. And then I think outside of PwC, I'm a junior board member for Sustainability Women in the World, which is the acronym is SW2. Which is an organization that supports female CSOs and also just females that are, in sustainability and leadership roles. So we have a senior board that's made up of several different CSOs, and then as a junior board member, I kind of help support and activate those senior board members because obviously they're very busy. And the intent is just this kind of scaling approach of, strengthening all of our impact pathways. So then, us as the junior board kind of working towards more junior, women that are working towards leadership roles. And then just finally, just started a recent fellowship at the Digital Economist, working in the sustainability and tech working group. So sorry, that was a bit of a long-winded, but I think it helps when I talk a little bit about the narrative to kind of understand the background of where I'm coming from.
Thank you, Brittany. So, as Bill shared, clearly over the past few years, we've seen strong reactions to terms like ESG, DEI, and environmental justice. From your vantage point at PwC and working with a number of clients, what has actually changed inside companies? Is it the work itself or just the language around it?
Yeah, thanks, Ducey. That's a great question. So I guess first and foremost, Bill's obviously right. The rhetoric and some of this politicization around these terms are very real. And interesting enough, companies almost are feeling it from both ends of it, as he described, meaning sometimes they come to say, hey, should we pull back? Or hey, should we, they're not doing enough, right? So they're kind of getting it on both ends. And
Mhm.
there's obviously risk and legal implications that, are kind of coupled with that as well. Um, I think maybe what's helpful to start with is kind of thinking about how we at PwC as an organization is thinking about this and kind of where we're going with this, and then talking a little bit about some of the clients that we're seeing as well and how they've addressed it. So, as I mentioned before, as part of this new role, I think the way that we're looking at this is that despite all of this noise around these terms and the media and everything else, there's two realities that's not changing. And reality one is climate change and climate risk and some of those impacts are only strengthening. It's compounding, right? And they are impacting companies even now, and we know it will only get worse in the future. And I think part of that is also that it's becoming a material financial issue for them. So it's a little bit harder to ignore when it hits to that level. And I think the other reality is, the energy transition. Yes, there's parts of the global economy that is decarbonizing, but it's not at the pace that we need, right? Given this, the increased demand from AI and some of the other economic demands. So this is an issue again, kind of across clients, right? Like we see that being able to access reliable and affordable, affordable in their terms that they're used to paying energy is extremely important for the companies, right? So I think the way that we're kind of, framing our narrative and thinking about it is, maybe in the past it was a bit more siloed and thinking about, hey, let's do a biodiversity mapping for you for a company, say, versus now thinking about, what areas does sustainability trigger business issues, and then kind of seeing it at that level for clients to then be able to address them and help advise them. So just to give you kind of a couple examples, supply chain and when we talk about supply chain, obviously this is very loaded, right? There's ESG is all interwoven, the environmental, social, and governance factors are all kind of wrapped up in this particular trigger, right? But it can't be ignored by clients. I mean, they're facing unprecedented, challenges in terms of this. But other areas are, regulations and data. There's so many different regulations and it's a lot of risk that's associated with it if they're not able to address them or have the data that's needed to be able to address them. And I think there's a couple other ones that we talk about: energy demand, and then value at risk. And I think this kind of rolls up to say, yes, our companies and clients are facing unprecedented challenges. And what kind of ends up happening is, with this is the way we're describing it is that there's almost value in motion that's being kind of rippled off and set into effect. And companies have that risk of not acting and furthermore not seeing the opportunity that could come with this as well if they do take advantage of this. So I think that's kind of where PwC is in terms of how we're addressing this with our clients. A bit new in the way that, this more integrated approach. We describe it sometimes like it's this huge ship, and then we're just trying to turn it little by little. It's not going to happen overnight. But in terms of our clients, I feel that a lot of them obviously are coming with questions to us to say, hey, how do we address this? And, we're seeing that they're not really scaling back their sustainability programs, but of course they're being more careful of what they're externally communicating.
Yeah.
So, I've had a couple, director of sustainabilities or CSOs we've spoken to that says everything must go through legal before it's released. And, and so those are some of the nuances that we're facing as well.
Well, I want to
Sorry.
ask,
Okay.
I think you're probably about to ask this yourself as well, Dizzy, but traditionally, women and to a great degree, people of color have been the ones that have taken up the leadership roles, the executive roles in corporate sustainability and diversity, equity, inclusion, and so on. Um, is this a threat or an opportunity for women leadership at strategic levels inside the companies that are grappling with these issues?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, especially through the work of SW2 and what we're doing, and talking with some of those CSOs, I mean, in some ways, of course, it's dependent upon the organization that they're working within, but, I see it as being an opportunity. These CSOs that are in place or whatever leadership level that they might be, I
Mhm.
mean, they really hold the pen here of the institutional knowledge that's needed to make some of these, to really bring it to the next level. And
Yeah.
so I think if they're able to communicate that to their C-suite or whoever might be their kind of who they're answering up to, that's the opportunity. They need to be the ones that drive this until that next level. And I think that if they can kind of communicate that effectively, then and really kind of show that business case behind it, because there is one, right?
Yeah.
Then I think that it's a great opportunity for them.
I would agree. And I think a big part of it is going to be really understanding where the critics are coming from, both on the left and the right, but really understanding where they're coming from, because that can help us to hone these professions so that they are not just window dressing and not perceived as window dressing, but are recognized for the strategic advantages that they can give to the companies that make use of them. And that can catapult a woman leader into an executive role that is more influential than anything that they've gotten when sustainability was siloed in this separate arena.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I would agree. And of course, the nuances are there. And of course, it's important to understand their business and kind of have that technical expertise, but, really important that they know who to communicate with and ensure that, I don't want to say it's a narrative like it's not true, but ensure that that they're getting that message through to understand, the kind of the business implications behind it. I
Yeah.
think ultimately companies want to do the right thing. It's just that they've got to address some of these, obviously,
Mhm.
what's kind of these external factors that are happening.
Yeah, well, they're scared to death sometimes. We
They
all want to
are.
do the right thing, except when we're being chased by a tiger, and then we just want to grab something and mash it. That's kind of what is happening, I think, with companies.
Absolutely.
Doozy, where are we going next? Doozy.
Yeah, so what's the way forward? Bill, you had a couple more slides. Thank you, Brittany, and we look forward to continuing the conversation with you and bringing in others. We also have a question from if we want to go there.
I'm still here.
We'll
I
do
didn't
that.
quite I
Barbara,
didn't
did you want
quite
to
hear what you
ask your
were.
question? Is it up for
Um,
Brittany?
is if it's a time okay to do that. Brittany, you fill out a lot of reports, and my knowledge base on that is very slim, and I'm very curious if corporations, and it would have to do with diversity, equity, inclusion, and that the more you can impersonalize sustainability and not, you can take the heat off. And if you are the metrics of garbage per capita or energy per kilowatts per capita or gallons per capita, are those metrics measured in all those reports that you create or you have to fill out? Are they asking those questions? Because that creates a scoreboard. And once you have a scoreboard, everybody's on the same plane. They're not, pushing buttons because you just have to lower your score. You have to lower all three of those metrics, and you're done. I don't think the people in Houston, even though they talk about social justice about the air, but if they just measured the air pollutants for all the cement kilns and stuff down there, it's just they want the air cleaner. So what's the metric? I can't get anybody down there to tell me how many particulates per billion they need to lower it to make everybody happy. But that's not my wheelhouse, or that's air is not my area. It's garbage, and Bill knows that. So
Thank you, Barbara.
Yeah, thanks, Farah. That's really helpful. Good question. So, obviously, data is in some of those metrics that goes along with it does differ per our different clients, and then where they're reporting, and whether that's such as a mandatory legislation or voluntary. So, obviously, like if we work with a client in oil and gas, they've got a lot more coming at them than say a different client, but. I think what is good is that at some point, especially like in 2018 or 2019, when I came into the space and we had, TCFD and all these different, we can go through the ESG alphabet of all these different acronyms of, CDP of where people can report their data. I think just kind of more, industry speaking, we are moving to a more I guess, synchronized approach, meaning, ISSB, I don't know if everyone's familiar where kind of TCFD now rolls into it, is being adopted across quite a few different countries worldwide. And that's what we need to get to is that standardization of data metrics. I mean, it's really tough if you think about it for clients to say, oh, I'm going to report this metric, but this metric too. And oh, I have to get assurance on that. It's, the rigor that goes behind that is a lot. So I think that standardization is a piece of the puzzle that we need from a
what
corporate
what is the,
sustainability.
what is the report that you feel everybody's going to be rolling into? I'm sorry. Could you
Um, Yep, International Sustainability Standards Board. So
repeat?
again, sorry, I'm speaking in acronyms now, but ISSB, and that is what TCFD, which was that original, Task Force on Climate Disclosure, is now owned under. And I think eventually that's where we're going to get, where it will be ISSB. So ISSB is what we kind of call it. And like I
There's a
said,
continual set of
Yeah.
kind of evolution of these
Evolution.
terms, and standards and so on. But I really think that as important as it is to, continue to refine the standards that we've operated under, we're going to have to disrupt this field a bit. The field is being challenged, and we're going to have to disrupt it from within. And some of that's going to mean that some of the explosion of metrics will need to be handled on the side while we listen. And so I want to move into the next part of our discussion now and help us to move toward what I think can be a higher phase of this emphasis. What's going to be necessary for that is first to listen to the voices of criticism on both the left and the right, and to truly understand where folks are coming from. Why is it that they get angry about these terms and these standards? Why is it that they are so easily triggered in politics? Third is to respect them for that, because as we understand, I think we grow in respect for the people who are criticizing us, even if their words are harsh and their positions are extreme. And then finally, once we do that, we can speak their language. Oftentimes, we try to jump to number 4 here right away. Just tell me how I should talk about climate, sustainability, diversity in the language of our critics so that I can communicate to them what I know. But if we do that, we're not going to be authentic because we won't truly understand where they're coming from. So we're going to have a discussion. We're going to start a discussion now where we begin to get to the root. So the companies that win this era will not be the ones. Well, I don't even remember what I said there, but it doesn't matter.
The companies that win this era will not choose sides. They will integrate truths. Sorry.
See, that's
okay, great.
brilliant. That's brilliant. I'm sure I wrote that down sometime. So, yeah,
It's been recorded, Bill.
It's been recorded. That's good. That's good. So, yeah. So, Doozy, you want to walk us into, and let's get Theo on the discussion here.
I'm gonna just kick off the topic here, being a little bit of the devil's advocate here. We're starting with a conversation about ESG. We want to practice this third way of approaching how you have to navigate the current environment and practice a higher phase of stewardship, and how companies can navigate this but still stay competitive. So ESG, isn't ESG just a progressive ploy to stop investment in anything implicated in climate change, filtering companies that have a negative impact on climate out from investment opportunities? Theo, what does the politicized left think? And Bill, what does the politicized right think? And then we're going to get to everyone sharing. We're going to ask you to get into the conversation as well to explore together how we could respond to this attack in ways that respect the truths and bring both sides into it. So,
well,
Theo, go for it.
Thank you so much for having us. I want to say that these are all going to be sensitive topics, so we may step on some sacred ground for you, and just understand that we do this in the spirit of camaraderie, and we may make mistakes. But if I were to take a strike at what the politicized left perhaps thinks about this, I would say that it's just more stalling. ESG seems to be a way for the haves to keep having while they make as little change as possible. And ultimately, they're placating and putting Band-Aids on a severe bullet wound that is the size of the ozone layer, that the hole in the ozone layer, that we are wasting time when more extreme, though necessary, action is needed. And as long as the profit motive is in the way, that there is always going to be an incentive for these large corporations to placate the left, but go as slow as possible, making sure that their investors continue to profit from the status quo. That's what I would say is the politicized left perspective on ESG.
All right, now I'm supposed to give the politicized right perspective, and so here's what I would say to that. First of all, this ESG stuff, and remember that I'm playing a role here, not necessarily playing myself. Um, but it's a legitimate point. ESG really is just the distillation of a bunch of left-wing um, grievances that they want to impose on corporations because fundamentally they would like to overthrow capitalism itself, and they don't agree with corporate power at all. And so ESG is the best they can do to try to nitpick companies on a thousand different issues and try to correct their behavior so that it fits with their underlying socialist mentality. And so what we're doing as a consequence is we're pretending that ESG is actually a profitable set of steps to take, even though it's a thousand different things and they couldn't all generate profit. But we're saying that this is going to be good for the company and it's going to be good for profit. You'll make more money by adhering to these left-wing woke principles or practices that we want you to follow. And then we're taking off the table some of the most profitable industries that are available to us, like domestic oil and gas, which is actually, since the US has the lowest carbon footprint oil and gas industry, and since the US is the alternative now to oil and gas from Russia and from Venezuela and from countries that want to take us down, this is bad for the climate and it's bad for the environment. So ESG is not only bad for profits, but it's also bad for investors. And we've got to take it off the table.
Oof.
Oof.
Okay.
That was a good
Bravo,
one.
Bill. Bravo.
Well, there you go.
Bravo. Very nice.
There you
Very
go.
nice.
Thank you both. Well, we open it up to all. Where, that was a little provocative, but where are the truths in there then? What do we need to be hearing from those statements in order to think about a framing that is respectful of both sides? And John May, you've had your hand up for a while. So
yeah,
please
I mean,
go.
actually, I can say what I was going to say before now as
Sure.
well with
Yeah.
this additional, view from both Theo and Bill. I mean, look, I think there's always going to be truth in all of the views. And, I guess I would say I'm very much in the middle. I said this in our small group earlier at the top of this session. I am based in Houston. I have worked in the oil and gas industry and in the power industry and generally in the fossil fuels industry. And I would like to say that many of these companies do want to do the right thing. It may not appear that way, but having been the chief sustainability officer at NRG Energy and before that in a similar role for Baker Hughes, I can say for those two very large companies, we did try to do the right thing. We did report and do report on many of the metrics that are the most material to the company. That may not be all of the metrics that everyone wants to see, but I mean, we have to focus on the things that are the most material for the company. Mm-hmm. I do want to address the profit motive. That's very real. There are many things that I and my team proposed that we do, but when we did the numbers for those, we could not justify it from a profit standpoint. So that is very real. That is the biggest thing in my view that has actually changed over the past few years. I think in the early 2020s, there was a lot of almost euphoria about making goals, announcing them with a lot of fanfare and so on, without really understanding what it would take to meet those goals. Yeah. I don't think that I did that personally, but I think some others did. I'm an economist by training, so everything that I do is very rigorous. And unfortunately, in economics, it's called the dismal science for a reason. There are a lot of things that are very important and good to do, but they just don't work from an economic standpoint. And if you are a company competing in the marketplace, you can't do something that your competitors don't do. So in the absence of mandates, government regulation, it's very difficult to expect individual private companies to do something that is going to be unprofitable for them. And that is an unfortunate thing. And then I don't have anything more to say than that, other than, obviously people have been talking about carbon pricing for years. Someone was talking about waste. I mean, accurately pricing waste into product pricing. I mean, those are all things that absolutely should be done, but there hasn't been the political will to do that. And individual companies cannot do that if it's not profitable for them.
And I think that Bruce in the chat raises a very good point, which is one of the ways to communicate that to the right, the thinking right in particular, is the tragedy of the commons phenomenon. Right. That, look, there are things that a company can't spend money on because in their market situation, they'll lose money to their competitors, and their competitors will take the lead, and then the practices that they were, setting aside will simply be carried out by their less virtuous competitor.
Absolutely.
And so when we make that point, then we have an opening to make the point that you made about pricing pollution. That if we don't price pollution, it is always going to be cheaper to shove your pollution onto somebody else than to control it and prevent it yourself. And so, conservative thinkers can understand that, and they can say, okay, I can see the value. And most conservatives do support pricing pollution. They just object when we say, well, we're going to price pollution and then we're going to give the money to the government to do good things with it. And they say, well, why don't we, instead of that, why don't we shift from taxing prosperity to taxing pollution? And that's where we have the common ground. But we jump too quickly to, let's put a price on pollution. And then conservatives say, oh my God, more taxes, more fees, forget it.
Yeah, agreed. Well, I think that's why there's, carbon dividend people that have argued for cycling those tax revenues back to people. And that has been tried in other jurisdictions as well. So, I mean, that is a model that could
work. A great solution. The problem is that with a political industry that divides the population in two, those pricing, pricing pollution, shifting the way it would be smart to, doesn't work politically because it doesn't create a giant pile of money to pay the various toll booths along the political route from idea to implementation. And so invariably, the prices become additional fees and taxes on the economy rather than reducing payroll taxes or refunding the money to people and so on.
Yeah.
George, did you want to get in?
Oh, let's see here now. Oh yeah, I got it open. Hey, Bill. And
hey, George.
I love it when Theo talks because his questioning skills from doing so many interviews at Earth X, he just really just nailed things. And you did a pretty good job being not Bill.
Being out myself. Well, we need to hear more from Theo, I tell you, because he's got words of wisdom for us to hear. So we're going to.
So here's kind of my general, I don't think there's anybody in this room and probably a whole lot of people out there that historically recognize not enough or doing enough fast enough to move the needle. And sadly, I think here's the reality. I think one of the other speakers anyway said something along this line. I think it's going to be when they're standing knee deep in water or their company is flooded or fired out or whatever, just devastated, and it hits their bottom line to the point that their shareholders start leaving. And at that point, CFOs and CEOs, maybe they'll do something. but somehow I just don't think they have the right spreadsheet right now, template, to look at enough of the variables that says, what's it going to be like if we cross +2 degrees centigrade to your company? And if they don't begin, anyway, I'm going to shut up because it's partially hypothetical, but then it's also real. When it's their company, their family, their friends, their staff directly impacted by climate chaos, they'll start doing something. But it's really sad that for whatever reason, we can't, as a species, pull together and start doing things just because it's morally noble, right thing that's got to happen. We're not going to get out of this by putting our head in the sand. So I don't know what it's going to take, but I know when the shit hits the fan enough, they'll change. And that's me. I'm out.
Thank you, George. I wonder, Andy, we could hear from you quickly, and then Gordon and Brenda, and we'll try to incorporate all of that in discussion. We do want to do another scenario as well.
Yeah, we got a few more.
Perfect. Well, so I just wanted to talk about aspects of being a cost factor. I think another issue was the solutions that we had 10 years ago would not pay out because they were just the quality of the technology was still in it kind of infantile stages. The difference is now we have gone through the pilots and we've seen a lot of success stories. It's just that a lot of those pilots have not scaled. And so therefore you don't have the economies of scale that bring the price down to be competitive. So, as I'm looking to turn apples into CO2 and hydrogen, I am realizing that you have to do it at a certain scale to actually reach the price points that make economic sense. And it's actually not that big. It's big, but it's not that big. We don't need to do the mega facilities that have been designed because those mega facilities are actually the ones that are really driving actually costs up the wazoo because a lot of them have preferred agreements for power, or they have all of these kind of incentives that essentially take away from investment in the local community rather than reinvest. So I think that a big issue that we're going to see going forward is a lot more small, medium kind of co-located solutions rather than these mega projects that have kind of suck up the dollars both locally, but also from
and let me just
awesome
make a political
transportation.
point about that too, because a lot of these solutions will be coming out of agricultural, rural, conservative communities, and smaller localized facilities that demonstrate the potential are going to be very important to broadening the political support for this. So we make a good point. We should go quickly to Gordon and then to Brenda so we can get on to the next case study. Gordon, what do you got?
Aloha, good morning. Well, one of my good friends is a guy named Dr. Delton Chan, and he's responsible for Global Carbon Reward, which is globalcarbonreward.org. We're putting it in the chat there. And that's basically like a bearer bond that matures over 100 years. And so what that does through central banks is it takes off the balance sheet that you're going to tax people. People hate taxes. That's what smuggling is all about, avoiding the regulatory environment. But in this case, we create a separate category that doesn't cost the taxpayers anything or contribute to the decline. It balances, it's a hedge against inflation. It balances out the economy because you're going to pay people in 100 years for the value of the mitigated carbon, the recovered carbon, all of the things that you can do technologically to reduce carbon emissions. So you create a global carbon reward where you're paying people actually to do the thing you want them to do, an incentive, a carrot rather than a stick. And it seems to make the most sense because at the end of the day, it's not on the balance sheet of the government. It falls to the people, to the market, and it creates.
And there may be this may be a trend in a broader way as well, because one of the interesting twists that may happen with technology so far, technology, big data, artificial intelligence has further strengthened the power of centralized institutions, of government and corporations and so on, because they have amassed a lot of that. But there is at least an equal chance that that these sets of technologies will have a decentralizing effect that will actually undermine the power of centralized institutions. And we may see a situation where we're investing really outside of government even being aware of the money that we're making and the money that we're spending, and unable to tax as they have in the past. And these kinds of investment vehicles may become ways for the economy to grow. Lots of dangers in that, but lots of opportunities too. Brenda, what do you have to offer?
Good afternoon. Well, I am new to this, so bear with me, but it's definitely in my wheelhouse with circularity and sustainability. I think all of us on this call understand we have a major crisis with plastic globally. That's not up for debate, and that's not a political stance. It's a fact.
Yeah.
And one of the ways that I think we're winning is that you're talking about pricing pollution. Well, there's a couple of acts that are out there. The Stewart Act says that all companies must use at least 30% recycled plastic.
Mhm.
So we're not keep putting new plastic out there in the world. And then the extended producer's responsibility. And the value added for that is any producer that jumps ahead and says, because this is going to be mandated, this is not optional.
Right.
So anybody putting plastic out into the world is
Mhm.
going to have to be responsible for that. So there's a way with the CSR credit, which is the little brother, if you will, of the carbon credits that we're all very familiar with. If you don't know anything about CSR credits, it is the next big economy. It's $1 trillion industry, and a lot of people are asleep on this. But what we're doing and how we're helping companies is for those that are polluting and putting that trash out, the equal amount of CSR credits will help them
Mhm.
become plastic neutral, then
Beautiful.
allowing them to put that branding on all of their packages. And any consumer, 80% will buy from a company who is plastic neutral, as
Mhm.
opposed to them that are not doing anything. So
Yeah.
I think there are huge steps in that direction to help solve this problem that we've had for 40 or 50 years.
Brenda, I hope you will come to EarthX and put it on your calendar right now, and take Southwest because they're cheap.
Yes, I know. I used to live in Dallas.
There you go. So, but come and please talk about CSR credits. We will be having a major conversation about circularity, and you're right, there's a great opportunity there.
Sure
EPR,
thing.
60 to $100 billion is going to be spent by companies on EPR packaging just in 7 states in the next 10 years. And we can, all the people on this call can influence the quality with which those dollars are spent. And we're going to know precisely how to do that because of your involvement in this process. So, so
100%.
stay tuned.
Thank you.
Doozy, should we move to the next case?
Let's try it again. We're going to do DEI this time. So, isn't DEI just another form of discrimination? Bill and Theo, what do you think about that in your politicized forms?
I'm gonna kind of take on DEI and EJ, maybe just in the interest of time at the same time. So DEI from a right-wing perspective. Now, this kind of grinds against me because I don't agree with what I'm about to say. But but we should be the right's position is we should be judging people on the basis of their performance, not the basis of the color of their skin, the gender, and so on. These kinds of qualities, it's not right to force people into these positions in companies where they're not qualified, where they're going to take down the quality of the company and they're going to take down their own future because they're not going to be able to perform at the level that they're called for. So DEI is just once again, even to a greater degree, the imposition of woke standards that has nothing to do with diversity. In fact, it is the imposition of a way of thinking that is uniform and leftist and woke in orientation, and it reduces true diversity within companies, cognitive diversity, the diversity in ways of thinking, because it says this is how you must think to be acceptable within our company. So DEI, forget it. And environmental justice is a contradiction in terms. The advocates of environmental justice are just trying to shut down capitalism, and this is their way to do it. There's a politicized right-wing position for you. Theo, what do you have to say about that?
Thank you for that, Bill. I would say that from a left-wing perspective, DEI is not about finding people who've been marginalized who aren't qualified. It's about finding people who are. DEI is there to counterbalance a 400-year selection bias to one type of person and to ignore the context that DEI came from in the beginning and to willfully erase its roots in civil rights, its roots in America trying to address its sins and right its wrongs means that America is now set up to repeat those wrongs. It seems to us who are on the political left, if you will, that in the beginning of the country, DEI did not stand for diversity, equity, inclusion. It stood for dollars for European immigrants. And there's only been investment in that group of people for the vast majority of the American experiment. And Dr. King said without equivocation that we should be judged on the content of our character and not the color of our skin. But if the color of one's skin has been the metrics by which one has been excluded for most of the American experiment, then you must therefore counterbalance that with seeing race to erase racism's effect. You have to see the wound to heal the wound. If you stick a knife in someone's back, 9 inches, retracting it 6 inches does not heal the wound. You have to see the wound. You have to first take it out, acknowledge its existence, and then stitch it. And given the fact that wealth accumulation, given the fact that advantage, given the fact that discrimination has created such lopsided economic outcomes in a capitalistic society, to be willfully blind to the discrimination that created those outcomes means that you are now passively perpetuating that very same inequity. And therefore, those of us who will be trampled by that cannot believe the words of anyone who says that eliminating DEI is to create justice and not simply perpetuate injustice passively. Then when it comes to EJ and environmental justice, those of us on the left who have been most radicalized into environmental justice, those of us who are so difficult to deal with in the boardroom, has felt the pain of environmental injustice most acutely. Those of us who are holding the hot coal can't understand why you don't see the burn on our palm. And if you were somebody who has been on the receiving end of corporate extractionism, whether you're an indigenous person, whether you're somebody who was from an environmentally polluted neighborhood, a lot of the corporate talking points against environmental justice goes through one ear and out the other because it's nothing but words, no action, and is the shoe lands in perpetuating the profit motive of those who are extracting from the environment and polluting the people at the same time, then there is very little bandwidth to hear anything that has any semblance of not creating justice when lives are at stake and people are actually dying in real time.
Yeah.
And that's why they're difficult to talk to sometimes.
I so much prefer if I get the chance to take your side on this issue.
I know.
Than mine.
Bill and I agree a lot on this. We agree a lot on this.
But let me say that here I think is one of the magic ways to unite the politicized left and right. The traditional conservative is not antipathetic toward diversity, equity, and inclusion. In fact, it is really fundamental to conservative thinking and understanding. conservatives understand the value of a diverse marketplace, of lots of choices out there, some the same, some different, because they know that that diversity yields value. Every variation in a product produces value. And it is statistically, mathematically confirmable that in dealing with any complex problem, a group of diverse individuals will outperform a group of top experts in that field. And they will outperform the top experts because they have a more diverse set of experiences, cognitive specialties, perspectives, and so on. And the experts will have blind spots that they've been trained to overlook. And so this is why the academic literature clearly demonstrates that diversity is good for the bottom line. It is good for innovation. It is good for productivity. There is no intellectual doubt about that for somebody that looks at the literature. And so I think if we can combine the moral case for diversity, equity, inclusion with the rational case, then we have a winning formula that can win over that middle 70% and more. And we can get out of this ridiculous politicized situation that we're in right now. But I would say that the left and right are both at fault for narrowing the issues and making them more provocative than they need to be. Yeah.
Just Bill, it's very important that as somebody who has taught diversity, equity, inclusion before, I've seen the abuses in that field. I've seen it taught wrongly. I've seen it taught in a polarized way that doesn't leave an out for somebody, and that tap dances on the guilt button without figuring out how to transmute that energy into action and the kind of bridge building necessary to actually create the world that we all want to see. And one of the hugest misconceptions that I find that the right has about those on the left about DEI is the somewhat joy that people on the left seem to take at white males being dragged into guilt and supplication. That's not a thing. Like that doesn't, we know very well that does not serve us. That doesn't change anything. What it does is creates a cold space in which they want to escape to the warmer space of those who perhaps on the right wing media echo chamber. And so the people who have most ardently fought for diversity, equity, inclusion do not want to see people who have benefited from a more exclusionary world to be fully displaced and dispossessed. That revenge thing isn't present in their hearts. They just want to be included equitably and left alone.
And that's important from, again, both a moral and a rational perspective. That from a moral perspective, it does not make sense to be bigoted against one group and then reverse and be bigoted against another group. That is two immoral acts, and they don't correct one another. But functionally, if you condemn a group of people, that group is going to be radicalized because they're going to tend to go to their extremes, and we will have an increase in supremacy movements for whatever group is being demonized. So rationally and morally, we need to be inclusive in our campaigns for diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Kate?
Thanks so much. This was great. This has been great. Theo, I loved your arguments. I will say, I've spent 25 years now trying to work on climate and many of these issues. And one of the things I wanted to raise on environmental justice that I find challenging is how do we kind of get to this tension between the need to create a new industrial economy that is less carbonized and moves us toward energy transition and toward climate solutions requires industrial development.
Right.
But there's absolutely understandable lack of trust in a lot of communities at any industrial development. And so I'm increasingly finding myself in situations where I'm trying to mediate or negotiate advanced manufacturing projects that in communities where there's just a bottom line disagreement with any industrial development. And so you have this actual climate action tension with environmental justice, which is very challenging and I would love to talk about.
Theo, I want you to talk about your background and history, because that is right there in your life experience.
Right. My lived experience is being born into what's called a redlined community, where banks literally divested from Black communities and allowed cycles of poverty to continue, and that included pollution. Just getting dumped on pollution my entire childhood. I had to overcome exercise-induced asthma because of that. I say that to say this. There are ways in which to have these conversations with folks where you introduce not only a set of ideas which you prepare for being rejected, but show a functioning model of where it actually worked. There has to have been a blueprint where this succeeded somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And that does not need to be something that, is marketed as a catch-all blanket solution for everyone. But those communities still be having needs. It's straight up, we need jobs, we need training, we need things. And based on the current, here's what will appeal to me, right? Mm-hmm. There's nothing on the current trajectory without the solution that these people are presenting, whatever, that would stop the pollution going as it is in the first place. Like, it's already going off the tracks. If there is a way to get job site training and meet the immediate needs of that community, if I could tell a young man who was probably involved in illegal activities, number one, this provides employment for you. And number two, this will, in the long run, increase your skill set marketability and get you to the point where we can reduce the pollution in this community ultimately.
Mm-hmm. But that's rational. How do we deal with the fact that people are pissed off after generations of being told this is going to be good for you, and then they're suffering from the smell of the dog food factory and the pollution from the refinery, and they're not getting the benefits that they were told, and they're just saying, no, I don't want any more of this bullshit forced on my community, and the consequence is there's no economic development and no jobs. How do we deal with that, Theo? How do we deal with that?
First of all, it has to be known that their no will be respected and that you will not proceed an inch further. That has to be known. And that there has to be demonstration of that. If we say no, is that going to be that? Or are you going to go some roundabout way and set up this thing that you want anyway? Because if that is the case, you might as well prepare the budget for the lawsuits that are coming, because ultimately the people who have the most intense experience of the pain that this solution will cause also have the most valuable data for those who want to implement the solution. But we have to feel like our no is final if we say so.
Yeah.
And that is something that is never demonstrated.
And that's a tough pill for a company to swallow, but it probably is also the wake-up call to people in the community that actually, if we say no, they're going to go away. And do we really want to say absolutely no, or maybe we want to say yes with conditions, if we're confident that those conditions are actual conditions?
Right. So anyway, I got stuff going on around my.
What do people think? I see. Will?
Yeah, I just wanted to point to Jigar Shah, who was one of the main people in the Biden administration doing the Inflation Reduction Act, who was working with a lot of companies to try to actually locate industrial production for the green economy in disadvantaged communities, talked about what he found is that often the companies were so used to making community involvement a show rather than a genuine co-creation. That they actually, even when they genuinely wanted to do it, they didn't have the skills to understand how to put it into their decision-making processes.
Yes.
So he talked about how he had to re-teach companies to do a genuine process of co-creation between the communities and the companies. But he said it was more on the company side than on the community side in terms of not being able to think creatively to find genuine solutions.
Yeah. That's really well said. And one of my heroes, Ashley Ross, has worked that inside the energy
Right.
sector and tried to change things. I don't think she's on our call today, but that's a topic that we want to dive into, and how to engage people at the community level where they have true agency, where they have true power. And it's going to take not just the intent, but a willingness to try very different models of financing and moving forward these kinds of facilities, particularly ways that don't just generate profit for powerful individuals within communities that can control the political system, but that creates wealth for the broad community. And there are ways to do that, but they're non-traditional. Banks won't finance them, and they're not as proven. And so usually people just default back to the old approach. Have a good relationship with the community, but rely on traditional sources of power to get the job done. Totally understandable from an investor perspective, totally dysfunctional if we want to broadly enhance the economic and environmental quality of our communities.
I want to
I think we're,
recognize that we are at time. Yeah, maybe Bill, you were just about to say that.
yep.
And I put in the chat that we would love you to join us at the March 18th Leadership Circle meeting focused on EPR in California. That's extended producer responsibility. And of course, join us at EarthX April 20 to 22nd in Dallas, especially on April 22nd, which will be the launch of Circle America, our affinity group and campaign for advancing a circular economy and culture. And with that, we end the formal conversation, but this has certainly been a robust conversation, so you're welcome to stay and keep chatting. Thank you.
Indeed. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to hang on for a bit just for any. This is, by the way, sometimes the best conversations, because this is the conversation after the conversation in the hallway, right? This is the downtime when you can say anything. So I'm here. I'm going to move my computer where I can actually sit down and be comfortable. And yeah, what do people want to add?